Howdy, folks, and welcome to the Hunting Stories Podcast. I'm your host, Michael, and as usual, we got a really good one for you today. Today, we actually connect with a couple youngins. We got Steele, Turner, and Gracie Spearman on the podcast today. I want to thank them, of course, for coming on the podcast, but more so than that, Steele's been helping me kind of set up a deer camp recently. So I was very excited to meet them both. I was very excited to hear them their stories, and they did not disappoint. They had some amazing Western big game stories, some crazy hog and coyote stories. So I hope you guys enjoy. I don't want to steal their thunder, but make sure you give them a follow on Instagram. It's Steele_Turner10, Gracie.Spearman, and Rax.and.Quacks. I will go ahead and put links to all that in the show notes. But thank you again, guys, for tuning in. Now let's let Steele and Gracie go ahead and tell you their stories. All right, guys. Welcome to the Hunting Stories Podcast. How you guys doing?
Doing good. Glad to be here.
Yeah, I'm glad to have you guys. This is going to be a new one. I've had a lot of hunting buddies before. I've had a lot of guys hunting or hunters on with their wives in the background, but I've never had an actual, I think, couple on before. So we're going to see how this goes. I know some couples can do things together and some couples can't do things together. So I'm hoping you guys can tell some great stories. So let's kick this thing off. Let's have you guys introduce yourselves. Why don't we start with Steele? Let's go there. Best for last.
My name's Steele Turner. I'm 19. I've been hunting since I was little. Shot my first deer at 7 years old with my dad, and been addicted to it ever since. Recently, past couple of years, I've gotten big into duck hunting, and we've been shooting birds, public land, private holes, all kinds of little stuff. And avid bow fisherman, avid fisherman. Love to be outdoors. Just always find something to do, but my biggest thing, I'm a big time thermal night vision hunter. I spend a lot of time, 2-3 nights a week we spend together outside hunting coyotes and pigs. So.
Oh, wow. That's awesome.
We do it a lot.
That's super cool. And then, of course, Gracie, why don't you introduce yourself? Like I said, we saved the best for last.
Well, my name's Gracie. I'm 22, and I've hunted for as long as I can remember, just growing up with, whether it be my dad or my uncle. My dad worked in the oil field a lot, and so my uncle kind of stepped in and was like, hey, I'm going hunting this morning. Like, do you want to go and like just hang out and see what we see? Like, if we see something cool, if we don't, we just get to hang out. We deer hunted a lot when I was younger. Now that I've gotten older, he got into thermals and then introduced me into thermals, and then I introduced my dad into thermals, and so that's basically what we do most of the time. We've been duck hunting a lot recently too, and just getting on some cool guided hunts down in South Texas. A couple of weekends ago, we limited out like every hunt that we hunted, and so that was super fun too.
Man, that's awesome. Well, cool. Well, nice to meet you, Gracie. To tell the listeners kind of how we ran into each other, because I usually end up doing that eventually on a podcast.
Yeah.
I'm going deer hunting in kind of Northeast Texas, and Steele, you're helping me out, man. And so we were connected by actually my cousin, or maybe my second cousin. I don't know how all of that works. But I can't say enough things about you, Steele, to say you are a gentleman. You are beyond helpful, and I'm excited to actually come out there next week and meet you in person, and maybe do some of this thermal hunting, man. Because I've never even looked into a thermal scope, so I'm pretty excited to see what you got.
Yeah, it's a different ball game, and it takes a lot of getting used to. But I've done it. We've got a company here in Lindale. They guide thermal pig hunts, and he does a lot of other stuff too. But I grew up down the street from him, and he's a few years older than me. And he started this thing. He called it Team Swamp Stomp, and it was basically him and a couple buddies running around, and they were shooting pigs for people that were just tearing up their horse pastures. And as the years went on, he started taking some guided hunts with some people, with thermal hunts and whatnot. And he's turned it into, a huge deal. He's got a 112-acre high fence now that's nothing but.
Wow.
Yeah, he high fenced the back of his property, and he's got nothing but pigs in it. That's all it is. He had 175 in there at one point. It's wild.
But it's crazy.
Yeah, we have a lot in it.
I've seen a couple properties that have a lot of hogs, and it looks just like the entire first 2 feet of soil have just basically been flipped upside down.
That's all it is. And he put a lot of time into this place. He took and he buried water lines all the way through like a center trail straight through the high fence, and he brought cow troughs up from the ground, buried them about halfway down, and has those filled with water, and then he'll get, with our local feed stores and stuff, and he has shipping containers just packed full of corn and like soiled old feed, and he
Yeah.
pairs pigs out with it. But he takes them out. He's got a big rack in the back of his truck, and we'll put hunters in there, and we'll go around. We'll hit a bunch of different properties, and if we get on pigs, then that's awesome. And if not, we bring hunters back. We've had people from Australia, China, all over the U.S. There's a big map in the gun room in there with everybody's pins on it for where they came from.
That's awesome.
And we get to meet a lot of really cool people. We get to do a lot of really cool stuff with them. Done a lot of hog dog hunts. Those are pretty exciting. Getting people that have never been around a pig, and we're putting them on the pig. We're holding that pig down, and they're running a knife in them just for the first time ever. It's really cool to see their excitement.
That's crazy, man. I've heard of people doing that, but only in Hawaii. I've never actually heard of people doing it here in Texas. Usually Texans have their big guns. So
Yeah,
that's cool, man. That's
yeah.
super
We
cool.
don't even Yeah, we don't even allow guns on the hunts. It's knives only. I mean, on rare occasions, one of the guys will carry a gun just in case. But we've run into like, especially if a client or something has a gun and just a pistol on their hip, and stuff starts getting a little chaotic quick, and we have 5, 6 hogs in a group, and we have 8 or 10 dogs around them. It starts getting hairy pretty quick. And if a dog runs out and the pig's after it or whatever, and they start shooting and getting scared or something, we don't want a dog getting hit. And we have them with vests and collars. The dogs are safe, but not from a bullet. So we try to keep it as safe as possible for the hunters and the dogs.
That's awesome.
Yeah, it's a
That's
lot of
super
fun.
cool.
It's an adrenaline rush for sure.
I bet, man. I bet. I have a friend. She played volleyball at the University of Colorado. Not a hunter in any ways whatsoever, but she went to Hawaii, and like she just tells these stories about running around at night and like literally just the dogs chasing the hogs, stabbing the hogs, just seeing like her blade is like this black shiny, which is obviously the blood, and it like changed who she was. She's like, I can't imagine not having experienced that, and I imagine a lot of your guests feel the same way, man, because
Oh, absolutely.
it sounds, I mean, I don't know how to explain it. It sounds heavy metal, right? Just like stabbing
Yeah,
pigs
I mean, it is.
I'm gonna go on a guided hog hunt and I'm only taking a knife with me. Like who?
Yeah,
Come on, who does
it,
that? You
it's
apparently.
wild. Yeah,
Yeah.
we let the dogs out. It's awesome just to watch the dogs work. We're watching them on a GPS tracker, and they're running. They'll be 8, 9, almost 100, almost 1,000 yards from us all the time. And you'll
Yeah.
start hearing them bark. They've got a set bait up, and we'll finally get to them, and we'll run the catch dogs in there. And when those catch dogs, jump on that pig's ear and pin them to the ground, it gets wild fast, but it's a lot of
I
fun.
bet, man. So how? I mean, we're off topic here. I want to get into stories, of course, but how big of a pig do you go? Oh shit, our dogs need help. Like, at what point
I
are you
don't
like
know.
worried about the dogs?
I mean,
I guess what point can the dogs handle?
when a pig will grab a hold of that dog's vest and sling a dog, there's a bunch of them there, but if it starts slinging dogs, we try to get in quick because the dogs are just all over that pig, and we're trying to get it over quick as possible. So we'll get in there, we'll grab the pig by the back legs and flip it on its back, and try to get somebody in there quick, to dispatch that hog. But
Yeah.
150, 200 pound pig, it starts getting pretty solid pretty quick.
I bet, man. And those dogs are crazy. I don't know if you listened to the most recent episode, actually
I
two
had
episodes ago, with Cliff Gray, where he
Mhm.
goes hog hunting, or not, excuse me, not hog hunting. He goes hunting with dogs for mountain lions. And
Oh,
man,
wow.
check it out. It's a good one. It's just one crazy story where the whole time is like, Cliff, I wouldn't have done that. That doesn't sound like something that I would do.
Yeah,
But I'm
yeah.
glad you're telling me this story. So it's a great one. But okay, speaking of stories, let's just get to it. We've learned a lot about stabbing pigs.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
now tell us a story. I don't know who wants to go first or who has one in mind, but why don't you set the stage for us? I saw an elbow. I'm not going to say who it was from to the other one, but I saw one. Who wants to tell a story?
I'll go first.
Perfect.
So go back to February of 2020. We're getting ready to put in for the Colorado archery draw for elk and bear tags.
Okay.
with my aunt and uncle. They had both gone the previous year. My uncle shot I think his bull was a 5x5. And then my aunt didn't fill any of her tags. She had a cow elk and a bear tag, and they didn't see anything that was
Okay.
within reach to get a good shot on. But I was just graduated high school, and they're like, "Hey, you're in college now. Like, you're gonna be free. Like, let's go." And I was like, "Okay, why not? Let's do it."
You're gonna be free. Just go ahead and ditch class. Come along.
And so it was the first week of classes my freshman year, and I told my parents, I was like, "Hey, I'm going to Colorado for 10 days to hunt." And they're like, "You're doing what?" What? I'm leaving. I'm going to Colorado and ditching school for 10 days. And they're like, "Okay, as long as you catch up on all your work." And I'm like, "I'll do it. It's fine." So
That's awesome.
I drew a cow elk tag and a bear tag. And then my aunt drew an either sex elk tag and a bear tag. And my uncle drew a bull elk. So we all
Awesome.
packed up the trailer, headed out to Colorado. So we left August 31st because we could hunt September 1st through the 10th. We got on like 3,500 acres of private land, so we weren't fighting with
Oh,
anybody.
wow. Okay,
It
cool.
was
And
awesome.
I'm gonna make an assumption here. Archery is what you're doing because you're hunting in September.
Yes.
Okay. Okay. I just want to
Yeah.
make sure that the listeners know what kind of weapon you're rolling around with. So,
Yeah.
okay.
Yeah.
Keep going. Sorry.
And so we get there. There's three other guys that came with us. They were all close friends of my aunt and uncle, so we all knew each other. We got up there. I mean, we got to the guy's house at the base of his property, and it's hour and a half full wheeler ride up to the camp where we.
Wow.
So we pitch camp or whatever, and we get a game plan. And there's a little watering hole that's public land about an hour ride out from where we were camping. And me and my aunt, both of our bear tags were public or private lands. We were like, well, we can split up and hunt that off and on between the two of us and see what comes to that watering hole or whatever. Um, for the most part, we all kind of hunted together just because we had a variety of tags and we wanted
Yeah.
to stick together because we did videos and all that kinds of stuff. It was like, and I mean, like, we're camping out of a shed basically. Like, there's no running water,
Okay.
no electricity. We took generators, took everything up there. We're living off the land for 10 days.
Yeah.
Um, which is super cool. Like, I've never done something like that. And so I was super excited to just be able to say that I had done it, whether or not I came home filling a tag or not. I was just super excited to be up there and have the opportunity to go. But
What
started out,
elevation, or do you remember?
I want to say it was close to 12,000.
Ooh, you're up there. Did you guys have any like altitude sickness in the group or no?
No, no, everybody was fine. And most of us they had been going to Colorado to hunt, and we've been up there skiing before. So we
Okay.
were fairly used to it for the most part.
Cool.
Um, but yeah, we got going and we set up a couple of cameras. They let you do cameras with just like regular SD cards. You can't do the cell cams or anything like that. And we set up a couple of cameras that night and had a big group coming into a watering hole. And my uncle was like, "Hey, y'all both have a cow elk tag. Like, why don't we try to group up and see if y'all can double up on a group or something like that?" So we hunted that hole for the first 5 days or so, off and on. I mean, we would wake up at 4:30 in the morning because we had a heck of a trek to get to our spots and where we wanted to be. Before sunrise and shooting light. So we would get up super early and stay up till midnight, just trying to get game plans of where everybody was going and
Yeah.
making sure we all knew what we were going after and everybody's game plan for the day. But yeah, we hunted that whole, I would say, for a solid 5 days. Didn't see any elk. Heard a bunch of them up on the ridge lines, saw a bunch of them, but no, nothing came in within I mean, we sighted into like 70 yards, I think, and nothing would come in within range for us. So then we were like, well, let's start looking for our bear tag. And so we jump over to the public land and we're like hoping that nobody comes into it because we're trying to fight for spots at this point. And we get up on this group, this mom and just two younger bears come to the watering hole. We're like, they're small, like we're just gonna let them pass. Like, we don't want to take a bear this early in our 10 days out here. We can just see what's
Yeah.
going on. And we're on like day 8, nobody shot anything. We're all kind of getting hopeless. Nobody's really knowing what's going on. I mean, the other 3 guys were hunting one side of the mountain. We stayed on the other, and we're like, let's just switch and see if something happens.
Yeah, I
Um,
know that gloomy feeling of 8 days of hard work and not seeing a thing. It's
yeah.
not fun.
And
But that's of course
no.
when things pipe off usually, right?
Right. Yeah. And so that night when we switched, one of the guys shot a nice bull. I think he was a 5 by 5, decent body size. He was pretty big. We brought him back, cleaned him up, everything. And so now we're on like day 9 and we're like, crap, we gotta get down to business here. We have tags to fill. So my aunt's like, let's go back to the watering hole, the public land, and see if we can find another bear to come in. Well, sure enough, a pretty good sized black bear comes in, and I was like, you can have the first, because I had already, well, let's go back a little bit.
All
Uh,
right.
day, day 5, I was sitting with my aunt at the big watering hole where we had been seeing a bunch of elk come, and a big herd came down to the hole. And they were like 45 yards out, and my aunt was like, you just have to take your best shot. Like, this is as close as they're going to get. I was like, okay, why not? Took the shot, made a great shot. We didn't end up finding her. We tracked for 2.5 hours that night. It's on into midnight. And we're like, we've got to be up early in the morning. Everybody else has tags to fill. So
Yeah.
we'll just let that one go and it'll be
Did she
okay.
jump the string, or was she just like quartering a little funny, or what do you think?
I think she was just kind of quartering a little funny. And so the shot might have been a little bit further back than what I really wanted it to be.
Gotcha.
We looked back on video and it was kind of hard to see where the shot hit because of trees and stuff we were trying to get around. But I think she was kind of quartering away a little too much, and the shot kind of got back a little too far.
Okay.
Um, was it in the right spot?
Yeah, I
Um,
shot I shot my bull that I mentioned, and like it was quartering 2, but there was no blood. So it's like sometimes things just don't work out. I mean, we were lucky that we found him, but I can see that just like a good shot, and sometimes you just can't find what you're looking for, and the animal unfortunately isn't found.
right. And it's super like, it was super getting down and like, dang, like that probably was one of the only opportunities I'm gonna get or any of us are gonna get, and nobody's filling tags at this point. So we were super down, just like, crap, what the heck are we gonna do now? And then we get into that day 8, and one of the other guys shot that bull, and we're like, okay, the last 3 days we're gonna make it happen. So we started hunting super hard, got up super early, kept moving around a lot, just trying to get maybe see if we could get the animals moving a little bit more just for other people around us. Then me and my aunt, we actually all 3 went and sat at that watering hole, the public land again. And I was like, since I've taken a shot on a cow elk, I'll give you the first shot on a bear since we both have bear tags. And she was like, okay, cool. And we're sitting there, and it's really kind of very ironic. We're sitting there, it's like lunch. My uncle pulls out peanut butter and honey, and he's making us all sandwiches. And I'm like, there's a bear, there's a bear. And
Like a
like,
jar
oh,
of peanut butter and honey, or like
yeah.
what is? Okay, okay.
I'm like, okay, there's a bear. And it's on the opposite side of the little pond that we're kind of sitting on. And she was like, I'm just going to take the shot. Like, this is as close as we're going to get. It was a decent sized bear. She's sitting in between us, and I'm sitting on one side, my uncle's on the other. He's trying to video, I'm trying to video. I can't see the bear at all. I never saw the bear.
Yeah.
She takes the shot, and then that bear comes running straight at us. And I'm like, and we're just sitting like in a little makeshift like blind thing, like logs laid down in front of us. We've got our little like tripod chair sitting on the ground. Like, we're completely out in the open,
Yeah.
other than a couple of branches sitting in front of us. And I'm like, this sucker's coming straight at me. Well, I have no other defense. Like, I have nothing in my hand. She's the one that has the gun. And my uncle's like, reload it, reload it. And she can't. The gun jammed up on her and she couldn't get it reloaded. So he yanks the gun out of her hand, tries to reload it. Mind you, the bear is still running straight at us
Yeah.
at that point in time. I never saw it until it started running at me. And then, so he stands up over her and has to shoot over both of us. Like, he gets the gun loaded. I fall flat straight to my back because I'm like, crap, you're shooting over me. And the bear's right here. I mean, that bear died within 5 feet of where I was sitting.
No way.
Yeah.
That's
And like
great.
it's a
Did it
little
like
like
give the whole the what do they call it? The death moan right
yeah,
next to you?
it did a little like spin, and I'm like, oh, it's going down in front of us. But then it kept coming towards me and like literally fell within reaching distance of me.
That
It
is
was
crazy.
a crazy type of adrenaline rush. And we tried to look back at the video, and it's like you see the bear coming at us, and then all of a sudden the phone drops because my uncle dropped it. He was like trying to get the gun all reloaded and stuff, but it was crazy.
Yeah,
So we
that's
were all
awesome.
super excited about that, being able to fill a tag and not having to track essentially. So that
Yeah,
was
right.
exciting. But
That's
then we,
super cool. One thing I want to mention, just this one's for the listeners. I'm sure you know, but in Colorado during the archery elk season, the bear you can get an archery tag or a rifle tag. So when you're shooting with a rifle, it's totally legal. I just want to make sure that everyone's aware of that, so that I don't get any mean emails or Gracie doesn't either. So, but yeah, there is a rifle bear season in September.
yes.
Keep going. Sorry, I just wanted to throw that out there.
No, you're good. And so that happened kind of late afternoon. And so now we're like, well, crap, we're about to have to pack out this bear in the middle of public land. And it's almost dark. And so we call up everybody else. We can't get them out of their spots. We're not going to mess up somebody else's hunt just because we filled the tag. And so we kind of waited around, tried to go get the four wheelers, and because we couldn't drive them onto the public land, we just stopped at the fence, but it's still a good mile hike in. So we're like, we're gonna have to pack this bear out right here, like where we're at, and just carry in the meat and wrap up the hide and do as best we can. Mind you, none of us have ever shot a bear. The couple of years that they'd gone prior, they didn't even see a bear. And so we had no
Yeah.
idea what we were doing. My uncle's like, can you YouTube how to clean a bear for a rug? And I'm like, okay.
I believe it. I believe it. I've had a bear tag every season I've ever been hunting, and I've never seen one. So
Yeah. I mean, and she wanted a rug made, and so we knew that there was a certain way that you have to skin it to where the hides properly lays out and everything. And so he was like, "You're gonna have to look up a diagram on all these different cuts we're gonna have to make." And I was like, "Okay." So we just all got this my little phone set up on the ground, and we're all just going at it, trying to get it done before everybody else gets done with their hunts before dark is completely dark.
yeah.
Yeah, that was awesome. And then day 10,
Let
last
me stop real quick. How's the rug look? I assume
oh,
it's
it was so good. My uncle
does it?
actually he got it, he didn't do the they didn't do the felt back on it because it was
Okay.
more expensive to do that way. And so he ended up he just got the hide dried and the head is stuffed. And then he made it into like a pack, and so it's kind of rolled up on the wall, and then he built a little like wooden pack thing and got a pack rolled
Oh,
up,
very cool.
canteens
I've
and all kinds
I've
of stuff
always wanted
on it.
something like that. That's a super cool
Yeah.
way to do the taxidermy. Okay. Sorry to
Yeah.
interrupt.
No,
Keep
you're
going.
good. And so it's day 10. I'm sitting in a stand, a tree stand by myself. I have my bow and the rifle because I'm like, whatever comes out today, it's going down. Like this is it. Now or
Hunt,
never.
a hunter of
And
opportunity, right?
yeah. And so my aunt and uncle, they take off on foot, and my aunt got really good at bugling and calling. And so he was like, let's just go walk this mountainside and see if you can't call in a bull for me. And it's like right at shooting light, and I can hear a bugle off in the distance, and I'm like, there's no way that that's like her bugling, or and I could hear it back and forth, calling back and forth. And then about 30 minutes later, he sends me a picture, and he's like, I got a big bull down. He was like, don't get out of your stand, just stay in your stand and see what comes out. I'm like, well, dang, everybody's spilling tags, and I'm out here day 10 and haven't seen anything to even shoot at. And so he shot his bull. I think it was a 4x4, and she called it in for him. I mean, it came within 20 yards of them,
That's
and
awesome.
awesome story to tell from them. But yeah, it was super fun. Just to hear them talk about her calling it in and him being able to take a shot and knock it down.
Was it the first
Um,
time that she'd ever called one in?
yeah, it
That's cool.
was.
That's awesome.
She was super excited because she had been YouTubing all these different things of how to call and ordered all these different kind of bugles, trying to get everything in, and she ended up doing it for him. So she was super happy.
I bet. I bet they both were super happy.
Oh yeah, yeah. And so I mean, I'm the last one to fill a tag, and so I'm like, come on, we've got to like find a bear, find a cow, something, some things that I can get on. And where my uncle shot that elk, he was like, I saw like bear sign kind of where they were hunting at. And he was like, let's just go sit over there and see if, just to see. I mean, what's it going to hurt now? It's day 10. We have nothing to lose at this point. And so I get out of my tree stand and we go over there. And I got down probably after lunch and I was just like, well, let's just go sit over there until dark.
Yeah.
And I mean, it's getting dark quick at this point, and I'm like, dang, like the day's over, like the hunt's over. We go home in the morning, like this isn't happening.
Back to college.
Yeah, yeah, back to reality. Well, it's about, I mean, like 5 minutes before shooting light, like legal shooting light's done. And then I'm like, dang, like it's over. Like I can't see. Like let's just get up and leave. And my uncle's like, no, like we're gonna stay the whole time, even though you can't see. Like we're just gonna sit it out and wait. And I'm like, okay. 2 minutes before legal shooting light, and this bear walks out within 25 yards of us. And we're just sitting on the ground, kind of behind some bushes. And he's like, can you see? And I'm like, I can't see at all. Like I can see like where the bear is, but I look through the scope and I literally cannot see a thing.
Yeah. You're like, it's a blob.
Yeah, like I don't know what I'm shooting at. I don't know if I'm shooting at the head or the butt. Like I have no idea where I'm shooting at. And so he like was like, let me look, and looked, and he like got the gun like where he thought it was at. And he was like, it's right here. Don't move the gun, just pull the trigger. And it's like he's like looking at his watch and it's like 30 seconds. And he didn't tell me this in the meantime. He's just praying to the good Lord that I pulled the trigger before the time is up. Yeah. Sure enough, I pulled the trigger before time was up, and he looks at his watch right after, and he was like, you barely made that happen. I hope that bear's on the ground.
I gotta ask, Gracie, did you look down the scope or did you just pull the trigger?
I looked down the scope, but I had no idea what I was shooting at, to be honest.
All right.
I had full faith that he had me where I needed to be, and I was just like, I'm gonna go for it. So we get the flashlights out, and I mean, we can't see. It's super dark. We're walking up, and I'm like, that bear's on the ground. That bear's on the ground. Like, didn't have to track, didn't have to do anything. And I'm like, where the heck did I shoot this thing at? I couldn't see anything. Like, did I make a good shot? Did I shoot him in the head? Like, what happened? And we walk up to it, and he was like, you shot it in the neck. And I was like, I picked the smallest part of that bear to shoot, and I shot it. So it's just crazy that happened, and we didn't have to track anything. It being day 10 and filling that tag, yeah.
So when you talked to your uncle, did you aim it at its neck, or what was he aiming for?
He was aiming for the shoulder, just like a normal, like, we're going for behind the shoulder shot here. And I mean, just good luck, I guess. I don't know what else to call it.
That's a crazy story. I'm so glad it worked out for you, but like I can't imagine. Just pull the trigger, you'll get it done. So that your uncle sounds like a character, but that's awesome, and congratulations. That's a super successful. I mean, I've hunted a lot in Colorado. If that's the only time you've ever done it, you were way more successful than all of my hunts except for this most recent one. So
yeah, a long 10 days for sure, but it was definitely worth it.
That is amazing. That's so cool. And how was that pack out, or were you able to drive like that was on the public too, right?
Yeah, that was on that was on the private land.
Okay, so you were able to drive the ATVs.
We were able to get the buggies down there, and we loaded it up and took it back to camp and packed it out there. So it made it a little bit easier than the last time.
That's awesome. And so that was 2020. Hey, actually, here's a question. 2020, there was a giant snowstorm. Did that hit where you guys were, or were you somewhere where the snow didn't hit?
Like here in East Texas?
No, 2020 in Colorado, I was hunting. And I was hunting kind of northern Colorado. But the Front Range, and if you guys aren't familiar, the Front Range is like everything that isn't the mountains as soon as you hit east, like Boulder, Fort Collins, Denver, Colorado Springs. They got snow like September 5th. And I was hunting up near Steamboat, and we got I want to say 14 inches of snow on September 5th, which was absolutely crazy. And I'm pretty sure that was 2020. I've had other guests that tell stories about how they were backpacked in and had to get helicoptered out because of that snowstorm from 2020. So you guys didn't have any? No,
I know that the year before I went, my uncle, they were hunting in shorts and t-shirts practically. And then 2 days later, they're hunting and it's in the teens in the snow. But
Maybe that's it then. Maybe I'm off by a year, but still, that's cool.
19 is when it snowed on them. So we were prepared for the snow. Luckily, it never happened. We were hunting. I mean, it was like 75 during the day. So it was perfect.
That's awesome. That's awesome. Well, Gracie, that's a great story. I'm glad that it worked out. I'm sorry about the first 8 days, but that's public land and just elk hunting in general in Colorado. So,
Yeah.
well, Steele, what do you got, man? Are you gonna follow that up? Is a bear gonna die in your lap? Because that's the
No,
only thing that's better than
never
5 feet
shot a
away from you.
bear. I've never shot an elk. I get jealous every time I see that bear hanging on a wall. I'm just like, man, I won't ever be that cool, you know. But
Yeah. Oh, actually, that's a good question, Gracie. What did you do with your bear? Did you get it taxidermied or no?
I did the same thing my aunt did. We
Okay,
packed it out and did like the little roll up thing, and it's all like hanging over with its head and its paws down. Super
gotcha.
cool.
Did
it's
you keep the
cool.
meat? Did you eat the meat?
Well, fun fact about all of the meat from the elk and both of our bears, we processed it all ourselves with like everything, rendering the bear fat down to ground meat, jerky, all of the things. The deep freeze went out 6 months later, and we lost all of that meat. So we barely
Oh,
got to have any kind of sausage. I mean, I ate bear sausage, and that was just when we were trial and erroring, seeing what kind of seasonings and stuff we wanted, but we didn't really get to eat hardly anything.
ugh, that's tough. I'm sorry to hear that, but that's like my worst nightmare. I have little kids, and my deep freeze is like we park the car, and it's a deep freeze next to the door, and my little kids get out of the car, walk up to the deep freeze, and spin the dial down to low, and I'm like, no, like, come on, guys. Like, I tell every adult in the house, I'm like, if you see the kids touch, and right next to that's the hot water heater, I'm like, if you see them touch the hot water heater or the freezer, fix the dial. Otherwise, we're gonna lose the meat, or we're gonna burn our skin off in the shower. So, like, pay attention to the children.
Yeah.
So, all right, Steele, your turn, man. What do you got?
Oh,
I know you're jealous of this Western big game stuff, but what tell me about some pig you wrestled or something. Come on.
farthest west I've gone is like up near Seymour, Texas. I used to hunt up there with a buddy of mine from high school, and he and I've got all kinds of cool stories. He'd be cool to have on here. But I went up there the first time. I think I was in 8th grade, maybe my freshman year of high school. I was young, and him, another buddy of ours, and his dad all went up there to this lease of theirs. And I get out there with them that night. It was like a 5 hour drive from us, and we left after school one day. We get up there, and they've got 2 ranch trucks, some old Dodge Dakotas, and he's like, "Hey, get in. We got to go throw some corn in the feeder off the back of this Dodge Dakota that just plugs in on a switch." He's like, "We're gonna go corn everybody's lanes, so when we get up in the morning, everybody can hunt, and we'll keep some deer in the lanes." So it's we go corn in lanes, and there's I think like 8 something stands, so they're everywhere. It took us a long time, and we're out bouncing around. We threw one of the thermals in the truck with us, and corn lanes. It was like 2 in the morning. We got to be up super early. Like, man, what did I get myself into? And we come around this corner into this open field, and there's a group of probably 10, 15 hogs. And he's like in this Dodge Dakota, like I said, like 8th grade. I'm riding with him, and he's like, we're hitting them. I was like, no, let's get the thermal out. He's like, we won't shoot enough of them. I'm running them over. So I'm like, this is crazy. He's like, no, I've done it before. So this old truck, it's got a big bumper, bed liner bumper on it, big 35-inch tires, and he runs, and these pigs start hauling across this field, but they stay grouped up. And he runs smack dab into the middle of this group of pigs, and I'm like, this is like inhumane. This isn't right. So he runs
Oh,
through. I
jeez.
think he ended up hitting like 3 or 4, and I was expecting to get out, pigs be broken down, like halfway alive. And we get out, I'd be dadgum. They were all completely dead, and we threw them in the back of the truck, took them back up to camp. We skinned them out and put the meat in the freezer. Like I was
No
like,
way.
at the time that was like a new thing to me. I'd never run over a group of pigs and not worry. Like pig ran out in front of me when I was driving, I'd be scared of it. I wouldn't want to hit it in my truck, but we ran through them. We had fun doing it, and got up, hunted the next morning, and we took a couple of trips. I don't know what trip it was on, but I was trying to get on a deer up there, and we're sitting in his stand. They called it the tall bottom stand. That stand, it was nosebleeds. It was a big box blind. It was way up in the air, but it had 5 lanes out in front and to each side, and it had a feeder about 150 yards in front and another one about 80 yards behind, and it backed right up to the Brazos River. And That stand was just covered up in deer. We'd see, I mean, it was nothing to see 30, 40 deer in the morning just walking.
Yeah.
They'd walk out, they'd hit one of the lanes, and they'd just start eating corn. We'd watch them, they'd walk all the way to the stand, and they'd turn and they'd go to the feeder and they'd eat the whole way to the feeder. And corn in those lanes made a big difference. But we were hunting, we hunted it, we'd go up after school every other weekend or something. And one of these trips, I'm sitting here and I'm asking him, like, hey, I was like, that looks like a good deer. I was like, I think I can shoot that deer. He looks big enough for the camp rules. I think theirs was 120 and above. And I'm looking at him like, man, that's a good deer. He's like, that is a good deer. And he's like, in fact, I'm shooting him. I'm like, no, man, come on, I want to deer. Like, yeah, I've been working for him. That's my deer. And he's like, no, I'm shooting it. So he was shooting a 300 Win Mag, and
You let him shoot it? What's the etiquette here? Like, how do you determine who takes a shot other than your buddy just bossing you around?
well, I mean, it was his lease, and he's been
Okay,
his whole life.
that's
I'm
fine.
like, man, I'm new to this. It's like my third trip here. It's a really nice deer. He deserves it.
Yeah,
So
yeah. If his dad, I assume, is paying for it,
yeah, it was his dad at the time, and
yeah, he deserves it.
yeah, for sure. So anyhow, I'm looking at this deer. He shoots. He's got, like I said, he's got this 300 Win Mag. Deer is about 100, 150 yards max, so not real far. He shoots, and the deer kind of stumbles and then gets up and runs. And the grass in between the lanes isn't real tall. It's kind of that North Texas just underbrush stuff. So we can see him trotting along, and we'll lose him every couple of seconds. Behind a bush or something, he'll come back. And he comes back out in the lane directly in front of us. He was on our left. He comes back out directly in front of us. And at this point, he's like close to 300 yards.
Yeah.
He's like, man, what happened with my shot? So he's like, the deer happened to just stop. He's like, obviously I didn't hit him. So he shoots again. And I see the bullet fly. It's beneath him. You could see the dirt hit, And I'm like, he's like, man, my gun's off. He's like, I felt good with that shot. So he's like, give me your gun. So I gave him my 308, which is sighted in at like 100 yards. I'm used to hunting East Texas. I'm not used to this long range shooting. And, mind you, he's shooting a 300 Win Mag, and he's like, hey, does this thing kick? I'm like, no, man, it doesn't kick. Come on. And we were young. And he was kicking. And I'm like, no. I was like, dude, you got to get your mind right. This is a nice deer. You got to shoot. So, anyways, he ends up shooting with my gun. I was like, hey, it's sighted in 100. Just hold it a little high. And he shoots and dropped the deer right where it was. I mean, it may have run just a little bit, but
Yeah.
found the deer. It was beautiful deer. And we got him back to camp. And we spent a few more weekends up there that season trying to find some deer. And
What did the deer end up measuring? Did he make camp rules?
dude, yeah, I'm sure he did. He was plenty big enough. I don't remember what he measured. He's mounted somewhere. I could get a picture of him, but he was a nice deer, really nice deer.
I was just waiting, knowing a bunch of. You said you're in 8th grade at this time. I was just waiting for that story to end up with your buddy like shooting, and then your gun knocking him out of his chair, out the blind door or something like that. I've seen a little kid shoot a 12 gauge and just like topple backwards. So
yeah, I think he weighed like maybe 100 pounds at the time. It still kicked both of us, but he made a good shot on the deer. And
man.
Yeah, we had some fun trips up there. We had one. We were just out kind of riding around, looking at the property during the day, and I was on my 4-wheeler, and I kind of come up over the crest of this hill, and there is this biggest group of pigs I've ever seen. There was only 4, maybe 5 of them, and I'm riding the fence line. I come up over this hill, and they're all coming from my right to my left, hitting this fence line. I'm like, those are huge pigs. So I get up, and I'm standing on my 4-wheeler. I've got a bolt action 308, the same one he shot that deer with. And it was one of the coolest shots I'd ever made in my life. This pig is running. He gets through the fence, and I shoot, and I catch him right behind the ear. I mean, it was a great shot, and it rolled him right there. He weighed 351. He was a big old pig. Didn't have big. He had to have been old. He didn't have real big cutters on him. Looked like they'd been cut down at some point. Yeah. But he was a big old pig, And
I've only seen pigs that big that were like somebody caught them, castrated them.
Yes,
set them back loose. Was he castrated?
No, he was not. He was intact.
That's an impressive hog. If he was spending a couple months a year running after ladies and still got that big.
I know. Yeah, it was wild. And I mean, all the pigs in that group were that big, and I've never seen anything since even touch that big.
All of them were that big?
Every pig in that group was like a massive, massive wild hog. And it was just wild. I've never seen I'm used to seeing, max of 150, 200 pound pig. but these were it was just a big old group that must have run together, and they were all like that.
That's
But
crazy,
that was a
man.
cool shot. And but we get him back. So I called my buddy. I'm like, hey, and there's not any service down there, but we had these little radios, and we'd talk to each other. And anyways, I'm like, hey, I shot this pig. He's big. I can't drag him. Like I said, I was young. I was little.
Was it just you? No one else?
Just me. And I was like, man,
Oh,
I
yeah.
can't drag this pig. And
I'm a grown man. I'm 6'4", and I'm not moving a 350-pound pig.
I know. Yeah, I couldn't even.
Like, no way.
Yeah.
We killed a 300. We don't know how big it was exactly because it broke the scale that went to 300 pounds. And the scale just snapped under the weight of this hog. But it took 4 adults to get this thing up into this truck. So,
I'm sure. Yeah.
Man.
They get heavy. And anyways, we get him, and he wasn't real far from that fence line. So we run that old Dodge Dakota in there, run the winch out, drag him up to the fence. And it was an old, just torn up fence. It wasn't keeping anything in or out. So we were able to pull the wire up enough and slide him underneath. And but the winch comes out of the front of the truck. And for some reason, it was one of the dumbest things I had ever done in my life. We talked about this yesterday. He and I were working together. And
that's awesome. These are my favorite kind of stories when people do very stupid things. So keep going.
Oh, yes. It was just awful what we did. But so we were like, how are we going to get this pig in the truck? We got to get him back to camp somehow. Like, we got to get this sucker weighed. So we spin the truck around and we run the winch from the front, over the bumper, over the hood, over the cab, over the back headache rack, down past the tailgate, and hook it onto this pig. And at the time, we're like, this is going to work great. We're just going to winch him right into the bed, disconnect the winch, and run it back to front. And it did work great. We winched him right into the back of the truck, but we left a pretty solid mark on the hood and on the top of the truck.
Steel, man.
And I was like, looking back,
I was silent for all that, but Gracie, you'll vouch for me. I was shaking my head like, oh,
yeah. That was like, I looking back, I was like, why on earth? Like, I would, and the truck was, it was beat up anyways. It didn't make it look any worse for wear, but still, I'm like, man, why did I ever do that?
Yeah. It didn't break the windshield or anything. I could see it pressing down hard enough and cracking the windshield or something like that. But no.
What saved us was the headache rack on the back. It stuck up over the cab just a little bit, and it was square tubing, so it took the weight of the pig. But the actual cable, it wasn't like a synthetic rope; it was a cable, and it was frayed a couple places, and it scratched the paint up on the front of that hood. So
I bet, man.
Yeah, we got a pretty stern talking to when we get back to camp.
I believe it.
Yeah, those right. Were trips.
Doing stupid things is an important thing to do. The best lessons are self-taught, right? Like you
learned
a lesson.
Absolutely. Yeah. But that same guy, this is only a couple years ago, but so we've got on the Sabine River, there's this deal that's been around since the late 60s, and it's the only section on the Sabine River that I know of that they do this. But since the late 60s, somebody went in there and built a floating cabin in the middle of the river. They took old boats, they took some foam and some 55-gallon drums that they sealed off. They built a platform out of them and then constructed a cabin over it. No running water, no power, or anything like that. And it's a good buddy of ours.
That's interesting. Now. It's still there?
It's still there. And at the time, it had like a 6-foot front porch. It was real little, and then it was like 30 feet long. So anyways, his grandson owns it now. And he rides.
Let me ask you about that, because I'm thinking, okay, you got something hanging out in the middle of a river. Texas, rivers are public land.
Yes, so that's the gray area.
He owns it? Yeah, that's gray for sure.
Gray area. So this cabin's been there forever. His grandson owns it now. It's got he's done some remodeling and stuff, and it's got a big sign on the front of it that says the original. But since then, there's probably 12 to 14 more of them that have been put in.
No way. Okay.
So you put in, you can go upriver or downriver from the boat ramp, and you'll find 6 to 8 of them either direction. And anyhow,
it's just good old boys riding the river and going, that's a great idea.
They run jet boats, mud boats, and they go up, they camp, So I grew up on the river with my dad, and, we were trot lining. We do a little bit of duck hunting, whatever. And we had a lot of fun up there. And but primarily just riding the river. We'd go play boat tag. We'd run around corners, and there'd be a little eddy. We'd shoot a boat up in there, and the guy behind us wouldn't see us. And he'd pass us. We'd come up behind him and be like, "How'd you get back there?" But anyways, a few years ago, I think 4 years ago now, my dad decided to put one in. So he took and he builds metal buildings for a living. So he built this big metal structure and beveled all the boards, and we took 80 55-gallon drums and sealed them.
You
And
said
then
80? 80?
80. It's
Okay,
33
all right.
feet long and 18 feet wide. And we built it, put it on a 32-foot dual tandem trailer, gooseneck, and backed that sucker down into the river, and it floated. And we put all of our materials to construct the cabin up on top of it. And when the river came up, we hooked 3 boats onto it, and we started pulling it upriver. And where it sits now, it's about 3 miles upriver. It's got a tagline off the back that holds it in the current, and then it's got a tagline off one side with a counterweight that holds it out of the main channel. And then
Okay.
one
Excuse my ignorance. Tagline. Explain that to me.
a cable that runs from the barge. We call them the barge. It's the floating cabin back to the bank. Most of it tied to big oak trees somewhere up in the woods, and it keeps it in the water. And so anyhow, we've got this floating cabin, and we went ahead and
how are those below water, above water? Like when people are boating down the river, are they going to get decapitated? Like
the cable?
Wires that?
No,
Yeah.
so they're flagged, but they all run directly up. So when the river's up, even the counterweight keeps it over to one side enough that the flag that's flagged, but the cables are well up above you. That you could jump from the front of your boat and not even get close to touching it.
Got it.
But,
okay.
Anyhow, we put one in years ago. Did the back half? It's got a little 3-foot back porch just for a bathroom area. And then it's got a 15 by 18 cabin and a 15 by 18 porch. And we put some bunk beds in there. We plumbed it for some gas. So we'll take propane bottles up, and did a solar panel and a little battery pump off the solar panel so we can get some running water just straight out of the river just to wash dishes and stuff. But we love, we go up there, camp for the weekend. Last year I sat up there and I'd spend 2-3 nights, and we'd leave out in the mornings and go duck hunt. But
that's amazing. I've never even heard of anything like this, and I'm very jealous of your life right now, Steele.
No, we have a blast up there. But my dad's fireman, and him and another fireman built it, and they dubbed their shift change. When they get off shift, they come out to the barge and hang out. And so it's shift change, got a big metal sign hanging off the front of it. But we were up there, me and that same buddy from North Texas that I hunted with, we were up there one night, and we'd run a bunch of trot lines earlier in the day. And we were like, hey, it was 9-10 o'clock at night. We're like, hey, let's go check trot lines before we go to bed. So we just tied the boats up to the front of the barge and just let them float in the water. And we untied the boat, went and checked all of our lines, and the water had come down a little bit, and we didn't know it. So we get off in this little spot where we had a line kind of up. The water was flooded outside of its bank, so we were kind of up in the trees a little bit. And it's pitch black. We're just running off flashlights, and we're checking this line. He's pulling it up, and it gets snagged on something. So he's pulling on it, and I'm helping him with it. I don't realize I'm floating back in the more current than I thought I was. So anyhow, it gets really tight, really fast, and it pops. It caught on the side of the boat, and it pops. And he takes a 5/0 hook straight up through the nose, in from the inside of the nose, and then out past the barb. So it's snagged. It's pulling through this trot line off the side of the boat. He's like, hey man, this hurts, like get the boat, it's pulling me down. So I get the boat and I gun it back forward and, get the tension out of the line, and took a pair of pliers and cut the barb and fished it back through his nose. And, he was bleeding a little bit. We went back to the barge and put some hydrogen peroxide in it, and it was fine. He was fine, but it was a funny story. He was just hanging up the side of the boat. He's like, man, how are we going to get this out, bros? He was hurt. And we make fun of him all the time. He's sitting there. He's like, kind of that little bit of quiver in his voice. He's like, how are we going to get this out, bros?
I've heard that quiver before with some of my buddies. That's so funny.
But that was a fun trip. And then last year we took a couple trips up on the airboat. We stayed on the barge, and we had that boat loaded down. We had decoys hanging off the cage, and then we had our guns down the bottom, had the dog kennel on the front, and then food for 3 or 4 days, coolers with some drinks in them. And we went up there, tied off, got the heaters running, hung out for the night, and then we went and duck hunted early the next morning. And hadn't gone in to check the spot. We'd found an old section of the river channel about 200-300 yards outside of the main channel that it was an old river channel, but it held water somehow. And we'd flown the drone up, and we're like, hey, this looks like this spot we can probably get some ducks in. So we get up there, we park the boat the next morning, we haul all of our decoys and stuff in, and it wore us out. And we finally got in there and sat for a while that morning. Shot a couple times at some ducks, but we ended up having a group of those blackbirds, the grackles, and they landed all in these trees above us. We're sitting in the woods and they come down, they're all around this watering hole. And I'm just sitting here, waiting on some ducks. We're sitting here, we got our decoys out. That sucker starts shooting, same friend. And he starts shooting these blackbirds. He's like, I'm bored. And he's shooting 3.5-inch steel shot at blackbirds for no reason. And he's like, my dog needs some work. So he lets his dog go out and retrieve and stuff. And that was a cool trip though. But the only bird we shot was on the way out. He was sitting on the front. He was sitting next to me on the airboat, and I'm driving. And I told him not to because it is illegal to do. But for some reason, we flushed some birds that came out right in front. And he posts up off the front of the boat and smokes a couple of woodies right off the front of the boat. I was like, man, what? You better be glad the game warden's not out here on the water. Like, that was so illegal, man. Like,
yeah,
somebody's shooting while the boat's running. They know what's going on. But those were the only birds we ended up shooting all morning, I think. But
that's funny, man. He sounds like a hell of a character.
Something else. He and I had a lot of fun hunting together.
I can't imagine taking a hook to the inside of my nose. Like,
yeah, I know it had to have hurt. I told him
it had to have hurt.
Might as well just leave it open and put a little piercing in there or something like a rhyme,
right? Just a little ring in there, and some bedazzled ring or something.
Yeah,
that'd be cute.
It's already pierced. The hard part's over with.
Really, like, if you're gonna hook your face, that's probably one of the better things to hook. Like, it could have been his eye.
Yeah.
I've told this story before, and it's not my story. Did you guys watch the show Alone?
Yes. Yeah.
Do you know Biko? Biko is the troll, the guy that killed something and put a bone through his nose. He wore overalls. So I had Biko on the podcast, but I lost the audio, and I've apologized to Biko 100 times about this, and I've apologized to the listeners. But he tells a great duck hunting story where somebody gets hooked. So he's hunting, he's duck hunting with his father, and Biko's like, I think he said he was like 8 years old, 8, 9, 10, somewhere in that range. And they're in coastal Washington, because that's where he's from. And his dad would always shoot these ducks, and he'd never be able to get it back because he didn't have a bird dog. So what his dad fashioned was basically a bunch of shark hooks, tied them all together, and put them on the end of a fishing rod. So he'd shoot these birds down, and he'd cast the rod. And, it's not that hard to cast in relative proximity to something. So he'd catch the bird and reel the bird in. And it worked out great. So he's like, oh, what a great idea. So he's out there with his dad. His dad's shooting ducks. His dad shoots at ducks. It lands in some tall grass. And his dad casts, pulling, and it's stuck. And he's like, I can't get this duck out. So he starts yanking on the rod, and the hook comes loose, which means it slingshots right at him, right? And we're talking shark hooks. So we're talking like big gnarly. And we're talking, I don't remember what Biko said exactly. It was like 5 to 8 of these things. And it goes straight at his dad's face. And his dad just throws his hand up and takes the hook. I don't know if you're going to hear me because I'm blocking my mic. But takes the hook in the center of his palm. So now he's got like 5 to 8 shark hooks sticking out of his hand. He looks at his hand. He looks at little Biko. He looks at his hand. He's like, all right, boy, strip down. You better go get that duck. And so he makes little baby Biko take his clothes off and swim out and retrieve the duck. And then when Biko gets back, then they go to the hospital. Because it wasn't like your friends where the barb was out, right? It was inside of his palm. So crazy story. I feel terrible that I lost that episode because it was one of my favorite ones I've ever recorded. But, what do you? I was using some bad software. I had my audio, so all you could hear was my stupid laughing. You couldn't hear anything that Biko was saying. It was terrible. But it's a great story. It's great enough that I think I've told it on 2 different podcasts. So hopefully I can get some more of his time and get him back on here. But
yeah,
man,
sure.
It's your story immediately made me think of Biko's dad catching that hook in the palm.
Yeah, catching the hook in the hand. Wow.
Ugh. All right. Well, I took us off track again. But do you guys have any more stories? Either one.
Yeah, we've got lots. Like most recently, it's duck season now, so we've been duck hunting the past 3-4 weeks. But since opening day, we spent opening day. Her sister is in college, and she came home from college. She drove 5 hours here for opening day. Well, she comes home for youth weekend on accident. She didn't look at her dates right, so she comes in for youth weekend. And I mean, that's irrelevant to the story. It was just funny. She came in a week early, had to drive all the way back to college and then come back again. But anyways, they came back down the next weekend, and we went and camped on the lake the night before. So Gracie, me, and my little brother put my boat in and grabbed the dog, grabbed most of the gear. We grabbed a tent and the decoys and some little heaters and stuff, and we put in and made it back to this point. And I'd scouted it about a week before. And we get all the way back there, and I was thinking, man, we're getting in here the night before. Tomorrow morning, opening day, it's going to be packed with people back here. We're getting in. We're going to get our spot set up. And, we're going to be where the birds are at. And we get back there, and I'm shining my light. I'd already come off playing on the boat because the lake I was on is real, real stumpy. I mean, there's dead trees everywhere, and you can see most of them, but the ones you can't see are the real dangerous ones. If you're running and you hit it, you're in trouble.
Yeah. Yeah.
So anyways, we come off playing. We're just idling. I'm kind of shining my light looking for the point, and I see 3 sets of lights start shining back at me. I'm like, are those docks? I was asking her, I was like, hey, are those like docks? Was that there the whole time, or did those just come on? She was like, I don't know. So I turned my light off for a minute, and they all shut off. I turned it back on, and they all kicked back on. I'm like, man, are you kidding me? There's people back there in our spot already. I was like, they had to have gotten there well during the day. We were already out there after dark. We had to work and whatnot. But so we had a little backup spot. We get around this corner. And anyways, I'm driving, and we're coming around this point. And I hadn't been to this secondary spot. Her dad had actually dropped me the pin of where he thought would be a good spot to hunt. So we're coming around this point, and I'm looking at my maps, and I'm like, the year before, this lake had dropped 6 or 7 feet. They had to do some work on the dam of this lake, so the water was way down. So the last time I'd been up in this cove was the year before, and everywhere I was at was all dry ground. But now it's all water. So I'm looking at my aerial, I'm looking at my phone trying to see where I'm at, and I'm cutting across what looks like dry ground on the aerial, but the boat's just putting right through it. So boat starts slowing down. I shine the light back behind me, and it's just churning mud. So I was like, oh, dang, we're getting shallow. So I cut back out towards deeper water as best I could. We're cutting out there, and we run up on a stump. I'm like, dang, the motor flips up or whatever, and killed the motor. So I'm back here working on it, get the motor going again, and it didn't want to come off. And, we're already cold. I hadn't eaten dinner yet, and we had gotten some dinner on the way. And I look up to the front of the boat. My brother's sitting up there, kind of kicked back up against the dog kennel with a Power bowl from Taco Bell, sitting up there with his fork. He doesn't have a care in the world. He's like the most easy guy you'll ever meet. He's just sitting up there. He's like, are we stuck? I'm like, yeah, you going to give us a hand? He's like, nope, it's too cold, too deep. I ain't getting in. So eventually we rock our way off of this stump and make it the rest of the way around the point, found where we were going to set up, and drug the boat in the rest of the way because it was just too shallow on the flat bottom. And got in there, got set up, and her sister, her little brother, and her dad met us up there later that night, about 9:30,
Something like that.
and we had the tent set up for them. And I have a cot and a little real thin mattress, that I'll use for stuff like that. But I felt bad taking it, so I gave that to her dad. My brother has one, gave it to her sister. So my brother and her little brother slept on the ground in the bottom of this tent. And I was like, man, where are we going to sleep? Like, this ground is unlevel. It's been rutted up by the pigs. It's on the bank of the water. It was just rough. It was just not, we just weren't going to sleep well. And, we already had to be up super early. And so anyways, I'm like, let's just sleep in the bottom of the boat. So we throw our sleeping bags down in the bottom of the boat. We didn't have these little mattresses because I'd given them to given them to everybody else. And, we're laying down there in the bottom of the boat and start getting sleepy. And I realized this boat is, the bottom of it all channels towards the center. It's very subtle, but it's enough to keep you awake. So we're sitting down there. Just
enough where you're cuddling your brother a little bit more than you wanted to be.
Yes. Yeah. So kicked him out, put her in there. I was like, I don't want to be on the boat. Okay. So I laid there, and anyhow, I left my bibs on because it was already pretty cold, and we're laying there, couldn't sleep for anything. I just kind of dozed off, and the boat starts shaking. I'm like, what on earth? I was like, is there a generator somewhere? Like, what is making this? I mean, the boat was like vibrating. What on earth? It was my dog. She was in the kennel. I was laying backwards in the boat. She was up on the deck of the boat behind me in her kennel, and she was in there shaking. Poor dog was so cold. So I cut her, and she comes, bolts over my head, lands down at our feet, does a couple circles, and goes to bed down there. She was happy as could be down there at the bottom of the boat. and I kind of doze back off. And then I hear
Shaking the whole
this,
boat.
yeah, and I hear this sound again. I wake up. Somehow, I don't even know where it was at, but somehow or another, she found the bumper that I used to throw for her. When there's not ducks and stuff, I'll throw that bumper for her. And somehow she found that and chewed it up, of course. I got to break her of that somehow. But anyhow, so take it from her. I shoved it down in my mud boots that were behind me and covered it up so she couldn't get to it. And we didn't have pillows, mind you that. I'm sleeping on my jacket. It was awful. We didn't sleep all night. And there's no way we should have come up with a way to keep heat down in the boat. But we had the little Mr. Buddy heater sitting kind of to our right and up on top of the side box of the boat. And it helped a little, but when it ran out 2 a.m, it got cold quick.
Yeah,
and
all that heat going straight up and not down into your boat. I get that.
Yeah. And we could just catch the little bit of side of it. And anyways, we get up the next morning, got up early, got set up good, got our decoys out, and got the boats well hidden, sat for a while, then sat some more, and we didn't even fire a shot. We did all that work, slept so bad, spent 2 days of prep, a week of scouting, and didn't see a bird. And all those guys that were in that cove, that we originally wanted to hunt, they shot all morning long. And I was like, man, you gotta be kidding me. So we left and got checked by the game warden on our way out. He was a nice guy. And her little brother's sitting in the bottom of the boat. He's 12 years old. And he's sitting in the bottom of the boat. And the game warden's like, hey, how old are you, buddy? He's like, yes, sir. Like, hey, no, how old are you? He's like, oh, I'm 12. So he was super nervous. And he checked us out. He's like, y'all got your life jackets. He checked all our guns and stuff. And he's like, is there any other hunters? I was like, yeah, man, go check them guys back there in that cove. They've been shooting all morning. But we got back to the ramp, went home, and we've only hunted once since then, I think, and we shot 5 ducks.
Yeah.
Thanksgiving morning we went out, and I think we shot 5. But then Thanksgiving night, just last week, we went out and sat the deer stand. We had this nice deer come up on camera, and so she and I sat together in the stand, and deer, of course, never came out. But right at dark, we usually take our thermals and throw them in there too, because when deer don't come, the pigs do, and both of our guns are suppressed. So I've got the video from it. We had a little group of pigs walk out, shot a couple of pigs that night too, which was pretty fun. And anyhow, a couple nights later, she said she got her dad into thermal hunting. And so she and I do it like all the time. We're shooting suppressed ARs, and she's shooting a 6.8 and I'm shooting a 308. And, we hunt all the time. We're used to it. It's hard to tell your yardage in a thermal, how far you really are from something without a rangefinder. And that really takes some getting used to. And we were going hunting. I hollered at her dad. I was like, hey, you want to go with us tonight? He's like, yeah, man. So he shot my backup gun. And we're hunting. And we get to this new property. I'm walking to set the coyote call out. It's an electric Fox Pro. And I'm walking to set it out. And I hear him hollering at me real quiet. I'm like, what is it? He's like, hey, there's pigs. Come on. So I get back there to him. I get my gun up and I'm looking. I'm like, where are they? He's like, right there. You don't see them? I'm like, no, man, I don't see anything. He's like, they're right there. I was like, what are you talking about? He's like, I was like, dude, that's a pile of bricks. It was like some bricks and some material stacked up like 50 yards from us. He swore up and down. He's like, these are pigs, they're moving. I'm like, no, man, that's in your eye. That's just a pile of bricks that had absorbed some sunlight and were warmer than the outside air.
That's amazing. That's just a pile of bricks.
It's just a pile of bricks. He was so excited to finally find some pigs that night. And we ended up getting on a group a little later. We walked a long ways, got all the way up to this feeder. And it had already thrown, and there was no corn on the ground. And so she and I had walked all the way up to it. Her dad was a little ways behind us. He had stopped for something. And we're sitting here looking at it, kind of waiting on him to catch up. And pigs start walking up this hill. This feeder sits right on the edge of a hill, real like steep. Looks like it should be in Colorado kind of hill. And anyhow, we're sitting here looking, and pigs start walking up the hill, coming to this feeder. So we're, now we're hollering at him, hey, come on, there actually is pigs this time. Like, you got to
yeah. Quick, the bricks are moving.
Yeah, exactly. The bricks are moving. So we get up there, and there's no corn on the ground to keep them there. We know they're about to head out, and he wasn't quite caught up to us yet. And I turn around and I can see him. He's to our left, not really behind us, but in relation to the feeder, he would have kind of been behind. And anyhow, they started. Well, I was trying to get him on one, and they started hightailing out of there. They knew there wasn't corn. There was a real moonlit night. They could probably silhouette us because the moon was at our back. So they were getting out, and you can hear it in the video of what she recorded. She's like, "Shoot him!" So she and I both shooting, and all of a sudden you hear him shoot unsuppressed, and it just rings out like I mean, so much different than these suppressed guns. And he starts shooting at this group too, and we never found him. We found some blood. You could hear it in the shot. You can hear it make contact. But we didn't find the pigs. We searched high and low. I ran all the way down that hill trying to track, looking with a thermal. Got all the way down into this next bottom, and it was real marshy. Like you couldn't have gotten through it without waders. And I was like, well, man, all I've got is my tennis shoes on. I'm not tracking them through. That's a wild hog, man. They're everywhere. And
right. Yeah, all you found was like dusted bricks in pieces. And,
yeah, exactly. But
that's great, man.
Yeah, that same property, our very first date, I picked her up. I was like, because I'd actually found her on TikTok. You know what TikTok is?
What? Of course, I know what TikTok
Okay,
is.
fair enough. So anyhow,
I'm older than you, but I understand the world.
TikTok. So anyhow, I've seen this girl's TikTok videos, and I'm like, man, she's got like she's.
Did you drop into her DMs? I think that's the thing, right?
I did. So I found
Tracy's
her.
Like grimacing. Yes, she did.
Oh, she was not having it at first, and I saw these videos. I'm like, man, this girl hunts. This is kind of cool. She and I would probably get along really well, and I added her actually on Snapchat and didn't hear from her for like 3 weeks. And, I was like, all right, I'll cut my losses. And then one day I hear from her. I'm like, hey, I'm talking to this girl now. So we start talking and ended up going on this first date. And I was like, hey, I know this isn't like a typical first date, but do you want to go coyote hunting? I know you've got a thermal, would you want to go with me? So she's like, yeah, let's go. So we go on this first date. And of course, it's still super awkward. And we're walking this same property. And we're walking to go get set up on some coyotes, and a group of pigs runs right in front of us. And I mean, it wasn't 5 yards, 6 yards, and we folded just a good sized pig. I bet he was 150, 200 pounds. And we folded this big pig right there in front of us. And that was cool for a first date. It was significant. Typically don't find
Gracie, was that cool for a first date? I think it's your determination. Not Steele's. He can't.
I think it fit better than going out to dinner for sure. I'm not a big like, let's go eat a fancy dinner, let's get dressed up. I'm like, let's hit the woods tonight,
Okay, that's awesome. Well, good for you guys. That's funny. So I've had one engagement story told on the podcast before. The guy in Alaska, his wife shot a mountain goat, which is crazy. But this is the first date story, so thank you for sharing.
Yeah, a little different, but yeah, it's fun hunt. And we've done a bunch since. We've shot coyotes. We've got people that'll call us and like, hey man, we had one last week. He's like, hey man, we got this cat, and we had a cat before him and a cat before that, and they keep getting eaten, and I'm pretty sure it's by coyotes. So we go up to call his place, and we're walking in, and we didn't even turn our guns on yet. We are carrying our tripods, carrying the gun in the other hand. We're walking into this place, and we're 100 yards from where we were going to set up. And I hear a group of pigs. I hear one of them kind of squeal. So I get my gun up. I'm like, hey, did you hear that? She's like, no, I didn't hear anything. So I get my gun up. There's a big group out there. And so she and I get set up on them. We shot 2 of them there. And of course, we didn't shoot any coyotes, which was what the landowner was wanting. But he was happy we took some pigs off his place. And we need to go back to call his place again. He wants those coyotes gone. But they're a nuisance around here. They're all over the place.
I believe it. Last time I was up in that area, man, I was standing outside and just howling for like hours.
It's wild. They're all over the place you're coming to deer hunt here. Hal's place, the property next door to it. I used to work for him for quite a few years, just kind of taking care of his land. I cleared all the trails for him on a dozer and whatnot. And I've hunted his place, and it's really not set up for it. It's not the way the property lays out. It's on a hill. There's a bunch of trees kind of on the hill. It's you're not shooting at anything. It's not a dangerous place to hunt, but he's got some cows there. So, you kind of have to be cautious of. But one night I was bored. I was like, I'm going to go throw a call up over there, see if some come in. And that has been one of my best little coyote holes. They just cover that place up. Yeah. I mean, not 200 yards from where I set those feeders up, for you. There's coyotes there. They're wearing that place out.
That's good to hear. I mean, well, it's not good to hear, but hopefully we can maybe put some down.
Yeah.
I want to tell you a story. Your terrible night's sleep reminded me of a story that I have. Basically the exact same story except elk hunting in Colorado, right? So it was my first season archery hunting. I don't know anyone that archery hunts. My wife's like, you can't go by yourself. So I just go on Facebook and I'm like, hey, anybody want to let me come along? Like my wife, I don't care where you're going. I'll just be quiet and, tag along. You can shoot first. I just want to go. A big group, like of a bunch of brand new hunters as well, basically. So like they don't have any more experience than I do. It's just a bunch of guys who are like, yeah, come along. And they're all military guys. And one night we're like, you know what, let's pack in. So we're gonna pack in a couple miles. And I'm like, well, I didn't really bring anything for that. And they're like, man, we're military. We got everything you need. And so this guy, he gives me like a little bivy sack. He gives me a sleeping bag, which is really not. If someone took a sleeping bag and took all of the stuffing out of it, that's what he gave me, right? Yeah. So we hike in like probably 2 miles from camp, find this beautiful valley, and sleep in this little valley. It turns out the reason valleys don't have trees is because they get extremely cold at night. It's where the cold settles. And it was the worst decision we've ever made in our life. Well, I ever made. So so I lay down. I'm in my bivvy. I'm in this sleeping bag. I have no pad. I think I'm using like my boot as a pillow. Like I'm like, I need my head to be slightly elevated. That's all. My other boot, I was smart enough to put under my backpack. Why did I do that? I was like, maybe it'll rain. Turns out it worked out because it was so cold that night, everything frosted over. And there was ice on top of everything except my boots because one was my pillow and the other one was under my backpack.
It was under your backpack.
Yeah, so that worked out. But all I remember is just like being so cold. Like so cold that I couldn't think. And so I was like, well, I'll just get inside my sleeping bag. But those things are basically airtight, so I'd run out of air. So I remember being in my sleeping bag and thinking, I'm not tired. I think I'm going to pass out. So I had the choice of either like suffocating or freezing. And like, those were my two choices.
Awful choices. Yeah.
Terrible choices. And so like, if my head's not in my sleeping bag, my breath was catching on the bivy sack and it was dripping like ice water into my face. It was just the most miserable like night ever. I don't know if I slept at all, but I remember just getting up and then of course we hiked around all day and didn't see a damn thing. So like,
it's always how it goes. The more work you put in, you're not going to see anything. It's how it goes for me.
Yeah, man. I think we might be the same type of hunter still. Like I know some guys are like, yeah, I'm just lucky. And I'm like, I want to be lucky once. Like that's not the way that I hunt. I'm
not a lucky hunter at all.
No, man. In fact, I'm barely even a hunter. I'm more of a hiker. I just am not a lucky hunter, whatever that is. So, but yeah, your story reminded me, and I remember waking up and the army guys being like, the first thing he said to me was, "I'm sorry." He's like, "You tested." He's like, "You tested every like the bag." It was like I want to say it was a 30-degree bag. And he's like, that means at 30 degrees, it will keep you alive. It won't be comfortable. And he's like, you tested every degree of those 30 degrees because it's obviously colder than that out because everything's frozen. Yeah. So he's like, sorry. He's like, my bad. And I'm like, no shit. I don't remember. I think my toes are, that was like 5 years ago. I think my toes are still cold from that hunt. So.
Oh, that's awful. Yeah, I had cold hands that Thanksgiving hunt. We took her little brother on too. And shot a couple birds kind of across this pond. It was it was kind of like a horseshoe shaped pond and well too deep in the center to get across in waders. So we shot these birds. Me and her little brother were like, hey, we're going to get them. I didn't even wear my waders. I was wearing mud boots and he was wearing his dad's waders. So they were, just swallowing him. So I'm like, hey man, swat me real quick. He wasn't tall enough or ready enough to go chest deep in water and waders that are oversized to go get these birds. So I'm like, hey, swap me real quick. You can throw on my mud boots and I'll throw on these waders. So I threw on those waders and we walked around, got out, and I get out there to these birds and they're still a little too far for me to reach. So I'm using the butt of my shotgun like a prying stick to pull these birds to me. And I finally get all the birds or whatever. And we get back up there and it's a good hike back to the truck. And I handed her little brother, I think, 3 birds, something like that from that side of the pond. And I hand them to him and I'm like, hey, I'll carry your shotgun. So I'm carrying his shotgun and he's like, my hands are cold. I said, man, I'm sorry. I didn't realize you didn't have gloves on. It was cold morning. It was 26 that morning. It was cold. And anyhow, we're walking. He's like, yep, I'm pretty sure I just felt frostbite in my fingers. So I'm like, all right, hold on. So I'm like, hey, take your gloves. I give him my gloves, and he's walking. He'll make it like 10 steps and drop a bird. So I'm like, hey, just put my gloves on, put your hands inside your jacket, and warm up. So I've got his shotgun. It was an over and under. So I break it over my shoulder. I put my shotgun on my strap over my back, and I've got this cradle of birds in my arms. And now I'm frozen because I've held 2 metal guns at this point with no gloves on at 26 degrees.
Nothing colder than gunmetal, man. Nothing.
Soaking wet hands. Now I've got this armful of birds, and it was like the longest walk. And at that point, I had, my bibs on underneath. I had all my warm clothes on, and then I had these insulated waders. And I don't usually wear insulated waders. I just insulate underneath. So I was burning up on the inside, just like sweating bullets, but my hands were so cold. I got back in the truck and I was like, I don't know either to turn the heat on and warm my hands up or to strip out of this and turn the AC on. Like I was so cold, but so hot. It was an awful feeling.
Yeah, I could just see you like just sticking your arms into your waders and just being just like this tube.
Around.
Yeah. That's crazy, man. That's fun. Well, guys, I've taken up a lot of your time. I don't know if you have more stories. I tell everybody I'm going to listen all night. I love this kind of stuff. But if you want to save some for another time, or if you don't have any more, or whatever you guys tell me,
we can save some for another time. I'm in no rush. But what are we at? An hour and 15 minutes?
Something like that. Yeah.
Something like that. Yeah, we can save some for another time.
Okay. Well, let's do that then, man. Let's do that. So let's sign off. Let's tell the people. I don't know if you want to be found, but if you want to share your TikToks and your Snapchats and your what are those things you steal? Because I'm too old to know that stuff.
Oh yeah, the TikTok.
Yeah. No, okay. If you want to share your Instagram, your Facebook page, you probably don't even have a Facebook. Your TikToks, share them so people can find you.
That's where I get my hunting gears on Facebook Marketplace. That's where
me too. Me too, man. Me too. But yeah, why don't we start with you, Steele? If you want to share it or not.
Yeah, I've got an Instagram handle. It's my Instagram handle is just Steele Turner 10. It's pretty simple. And then she and I have a joint account called Racks and Quacks. Like deer racks and mallard ducks. And we're trying to grow.
I assumed.
We're trying to grow that page. We're small on it right now, but we're trying to get it there. It's a pretty cool page. So we try to add all our hunting stories and some of our kills and stuff on there. We try to post as many pictures on there as often as we can. So and she can
awesome.
If she wants.
And so those are on what's is that Instagram, Facebook, TikTok?
Instagram. Yeah, both.
Okay. Cool. Yeah. Gracie.
Other than the Racks and Quacks one, my Instagram is just Gracie Spearman.
Pretty simple.
Perfect.
Yeah, our personals are real simple. So.
Yeah, awesome, guys. Well, this was fun, and I'm excited to meet you guys maybe next week. I don't know, Gracie, you're gonna show up, and I want to say grace your presence, but I'm trying not to make a pun of your name. But yeah, thank you guys. I appreciate it. This was a lot of fun. Some amazing stories. You opened my eyes to some stuff that I didn't even know existed. Like
hopefully you get a taste of it next weekend.
Yeah. Well, hopefully, man. Hopefully, but
hopefully we get something.
Cool. All right. Well, thank you guys. I appreciate your time.
Absolutely.
Thank
yes,
you.
Sir. Bye.
Yep. All right, guys. That's it. Another couple stories in the books. Of course, I want to thank again Steele and Gracie for coming on the podcast. Go ahead and give them a follow on Instagram. All the information you need is in the show notes, so please check it out there. But I want to thank you guys, of course, for tuning in and listening to the podcast. I've had a lot of listeners recently reach out. So if you have some hunting stories, hit me up on Instagram. I'd love to hear your stories. I'd love to share them with our listener base. But that's it, guys. Thank you again. I appreciate you all. Gracie, Steele, thank you so much for coming on the podcast. I'm excited to get up there and maybe kill some hogs with you. But that's it, guys. Get out there and, make some stories of your own. Thank you.